Okay, welcome to another Happy Histories video with Michael and Christian. We are still in Clapham, but this is old Clapham. And I've brought you here because this is the burial site of Henry Thornton, who was William Wilberforce's right-hand man. Or was it vice versa? I'm not sure. Because really, Henry Thornton, of course, he was a member of Parliament, but he was also a great banker. And he financed a lot of the Clapham sect's campaigns. They wanted to abolish the slave trade, but they realised that they had to do it gradually, because of course a lot of the people who were the MPs at the time, they owned slaves and they were instrumental in it. And it was also realised that if they abolished it suddenly, somebody else would move in and fill that vacuum. But Henry Thornton, he financed it really, and actually his daughter is buried in his wife is buried here as well, Marianne, and she was involved in education, and I'll talk about that just in a moment. John Venn, who was the parish priest of Trinity, the Holy Trinity Church in Clapham Common, he is buried here as well. In fact, this St. Paul's was actually called the Holy Trinity Church, and there was a place of worship. Although this was only built in 1815, there was a place of worship here since Norman times and perhaps even Saxon times. But it had run down so much that it was abandoned, and they built the Holy Trinity. But as the area developed, they realised they needed another church, and this was built as well. Although during the war it was bombed, and it wasn't actually restored until the 1950s. Another person who was really instrumental in the abolition of the slave trade was a chap called Granville Sharp. They had wonderful names, and he was a lawyer. And one of the quirks of one of the loopholes that they found to help runaway slaves, because of course a lot of people, they had slaves overseas, and when they brought some of them back here as servants, and some of them ran away, and they went to people who were involved in the Clapham sect. And Granville Sharp, he actually fought their cases, and under English law we didn't have slavery as such, so they would come over here. Some of the servants that they brought over, they would make them sign a thing making them indentured servants rather than slaves. But one of the things that Granville Sharp really highlighted was the case of the Zong massacre. There was a slaving ship, and it was making its way over to America. They'd been hit by a storm, were low on water. So what they did, they threw the slaves overboard in their chains, and they all sank and they died. And then they had the nerve to try to claim the insurance, because their cargo was insured, and they tried to claim their insurance. Granville Sharp highlighted this thing, and he brought it all to court, and he was overruled though. They weren't, charged with murder as such, but they didn't win their insurance claim. But let me just take you around the corner to where Marianne worked. So follow me. Okay, now this was the home. It was a school, in fact, in the late 1700s, early 1800s, and about 20 young children from Sierra Leone were brought here to be educated by the Clapham sect, and the idea was to give them a general education, but the main emphasis was on the Bible and religious studies, because they had a very practical mindset. And after the war, when America became independent, a lot of the slaves that were in America, the Clapham sect wanted to establish them in Africa. So they set up the Sierra Leone Company, and the capital, of course, is called Freetown, because this is where the Africans will be free. But unfortunately, some of the people that they transported over there, transported back to Africa, were from a completely different area in Africa. And I'd imagine the people in the area say, who are these bloody foreigners they're bringing over here? But one of the other things that they did was they got about 20 of these kids and they brought them over here to educate them. Sadly, about half of them contracted measles and they are buried in the church over there. But, you know, it really is kind of food for thought. Now, a little PS about the church. But one of the quirky things I love about it is you have probably seen this church on film. Because, of course, about 20 years ago, we had a very popular film called Love Actually. And one of the main actors was Liam Neeson, and he was there with his son, his orphan son, because his wife had passed away. And the funeral service was held in St. Paul's. And, of course, his wife, she didn't want anybody to be upset and mournful and so forth. So the music she chose for her ceremony was the Bay City Rollers, Bye Bye Baby Bye Bye. And I'll never forget it. It was a very funny sort of a clip. But anyway, there you have St. Paul's of Clapham. Thank you very much for watching. Look out for more videos. Okay, now this is another PS, a postscript, something I forgot to mention earlier. Clapham, clap is an old word for hill. Ham is hamlet. So of course, back in the mists of time, this was just a little hamlet, you know, outside of London. But, you know, as things developed, Clapham was linked to London with a bus service, you know, initially with horse-drawn and then petrol engine vehicles. And lawyers, when they wanted to talk about the ordinary man in the street, they referred to the man who would be on the top deck of the Clapham omnibus. It's a peculiar fact, but it tickles me. Okay, thank you for watching.